You get paid, and instead of the usual small purchases, the coffee, the impulse buy, the delivery order, you save every single extra dollar instead. Not some of it, all of it. Starting today and continuing for the rest of your life, what would actually happen to your money, your habits, and your life if you did this? At first, it sounds simple, almost boring. Just don't spend the extra money. But saving every extra dollar isn't just a math problem about numbers piling up in an account. It changes your relationship with nearly every small decision you make in a day. And those small decisions turn out to be doing a lot more psychological work than most people realize. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what small, frequent purchases actually do for your brain beyond just buying the item itself. Behavioral economists who study spending habits have found that small purchases often function as tiny reward signals throughout the day. A coffee, a snack, a small treat, each one delivering a brief hit of pleasure that has little to do with the actual value of the item. Remove that spending entirely, and you're not simply saving money. You're removing a steady stream of small psychological rewards your brain has likely grown used to receiving throughout an ordinary day. Now imagine what your first fully frugal week would actually feel like. You walk past the coffee shop you used to visit automatically, and there's a small moment of friction, a tiny voice asking why you're not going in. Researchers who study habit formation have found that spending habits, like most habits, are often triggered by specific cues, a certain time of day, a certain location, a certain feeling, rather than by careful, deliberate decision-making each time. Simply deciding to save more doesn't eliminate those triggers. It just means you now have to consciously override them, one small moment at a time, dozens of times a day, until new patterns eventually form. Here's where the science gets genuinely interesting. Researchers who study willpower and decision fatigue have found that resisting small temptations repeatedly throughout the day can gradually deplete a person's capacity for self-control, making later decisions in the day measurably harder to make well. If saving every extra dollar means constantly resisting dozens of small purchase decisions, you might find yourself more mentally exhausted by the end of each day. Not because saving itself is hard, but because the sheer number of small resistances adds up in ways spending never required. Now scale this up to something bigger, your relationship with other people. Right now, small spontaneous spending often plays a subtle social role, buying a coworker's coffee, splitting a meal without calculating it exactly, saying yes to a spontaneous outing without checking your budget first. Sociologists who study money and relationships have found that flexible, unplanned spending is often part of how people signal generosity, spontaneity, and social ease within their relationships. If every extra dollar becomes something to save rather than spend, some of those small social moments might start to feel more calculated, even if your intentions haven't changed at all. This is where the twist comes in. You might expect strict saving to simply make you wealthier over time, which is true, but researchers who study financial behavior have found that extremely restrictive saving habits can sometimes backfire, leading to periods of binge spending once the accumulated psychological restriction becomes too much to sustain. In other words, saving every single extra dollar without exception isn't just a math strategy. It's a psychological experiment in delayed gratification, and delayed gratification, taken to an extreme, doesn't always hold up as smoothly as the simple math would suggest. Think about what this means for something as ordinary as a special occasion. A friend's birthday, an anniversary, a rare night out. Right now, these moments often come with a kind of permission to spend a little more freely than usual. Under a strict save every extra dollar rule, would you make exceptions? And if so, doesn't that mean the rule was never truly absolute in the first place? Behavioral researchers who study rule-based financial habits have found that people who build in planned flexibility, deliberate, budgeted exceptions, rather than strict all-or-nothing rules, tend to sustain long-term financial habits more successfully than those attempting total restriction. Now widen the lens to something bigger. What if you kept this up not just for a few months, but for decades? The mathematics of compound growth would start to matter more than the psychology. Financial researchers who study long term saving have found that consistently saving even modest amounts, when invested and allowed to grow over long time horizons, tends to produce dramatically larger outcomes than most people intuitively expect, specifically because compound growth accelerates significantly in its later years. Someone who saved every extra dollar for 30 years wouldn't just have 30 years worth of savings. They could end up with a total meaningfully larger than that simple sum, purely because of how compound growth behaves over long stretches of time. But here's the twist most people don't expect. Extreme saving doesn't automatically translate into extreme wealth if the money isn't put to productive use. Financial planning researchers have found that cash sitting completely uninvested, simply accumulated and left untouched, tends to lose purchasing power over time due to inflation, meaning that saving alone, without any strategy for growth, can actually underperform more moderate saving paired with thoughtful investing. Someone who saves every dollar but keeps it all in a low interest account might, decades later, find themselves with meaningfully less real purchasing power than someone who saved less but invested more strategically. Now bring this back to something deeply personal, your sense of identity and daily experience. If literally every extra dollar goes to savings indefinitely, your day-to-day life could start to feel oddly frozen in place, never quite upgrading, rarely allowing for spontaneous enjoyment, always deferring comfort to some future version of yourself. Psychologists who study money and well-being have found that spending on experiences, even modest ones, often contributes meaningfully to day-to-day life satisfaction in ways that pure accumulation does not replicate on its own. A life built entirely around saving every extra dollar might become financially secure while quietly becoming less enjoyable to actually live inside of, day by day. So what if you saved every extra dollar instead of spending it? You would not simply end up wealthier, though you likely would. You would also be running a long-term experiment in delayed gratification, decision fatigue, and social flexibility. One that could either compound into extraordinary long-term security or quietly erode the small daily pleasures and social ease that make ordinary life feel comfortable along the way. Maybe the real skill was never simply saving everything or spending everything. Maybe it was always about deciding, deliberately and with real intention, which extra dollars are actually worth spending, and letting the rest quietly build towards something bigger.